Hi, in this video, I'm going to talk about RESTCONF. So this is just going to be a short preview. I'll have other presentations and other videos that go into RESTCONF in a lot more detail later. So it is an IETF draft and is a particular implementation of a RESTful API. I'll talk about a couple of those characteristics of RESTful APIs in a moment here, but again, more in later videos. It is HTTP-based protocol. It provides a programmatic interface for accessing data that is modeled in Yang. So Yang is something else we'll talk about in more detail a little later. Both RESTCONF and NetConf use Yang as the data modeling language. RESTCONF supports both JSON and XML encoding. Part of being one of the characteristics of being a RESTful architecture is that it is client server based. So over here, you see we have a client computer and it is using a web browser to access a web server. So the HTTP GET and gets a response using HTML as part of the web objects. With RESTCONF, it uses an API client. We'll be using one of those in this video, Postman. Again, it sends the HTTP GET, but the response is JSON or XML. So it is stateless. Stateless means the server does not maintain any state, isn't keeping track of anything. So in this case, the clients have to send everything that is required to the server in the GET so that the server can perform the requested operation and send everything back to the client, and then it's over. The server doesn't maintain any state about what just occurred. Okay. Mentioned that it is a RESTCONF it uses the HTTP-based protocol, so it does support GET, PUT, patch, post, and delete request types. And we will see more of those later. Today, we're going to take a look at an example of GET. So this little diagram here shows RESTCONF on the right, and actually grayed out is NetConf on the left. So as far as the data model, RESTCONF uses Yang, can also use XSD for encoding both XML and JSON. It is HTTP based. And we're going to be looking at RESTful RESTCONF. So there's also a way that you can use it in a non-RESTful manner. I'll talk more about that later. Okay. And as far as accessing the devices, we could use Python, Postman, which I'm going to show you an example of, and curl, among others. So let me move that out of the way and let me show you what we have here. On the right, I have my Cisco router, which is a CSR 1000 kV router. Okay, now, as a matter of fact, if I do show IP interface brief here, I can get some information on my IP addresses. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to use Postman to actually access that same information using RESTCONF, a RESTCONF API. All right, so what I should do is probably, there we go, I'll close that. So I'm going to use a GET request here. So you can see that I can have other options besides GET. Then I'm going to put in the request URL. So I'm going to type in HTTP, S, and I'm actually going to put in, just going to let it see, do I have my RESTCONF one there? Here we go. Okay, here I have it's already set up. So let me show you this HTTPS. And then I have the IP address, RESTCONF. And then this here is actually, we'll talk more about this later, but this is saying using the Yang model, IETF interfaces, that I want to get some information about the interfaces. We'll talk more about this later. I'm going to go over here to authorization. Okay, and I'm going to use basic authorization, basic auth. And you can see I've already got a username and password. I don't mind showing you what that password is. Cisco and Cisco123. Okay. So this is information I have configured on the CSR 1000V here for username and password for authentication. Okay, go over here to headers. And by default, by the way, you'll see it shown as hidden, but I'm going to show you all the headers here. And I'm actually going to add a couple of headers here. Let me scroll this down a little bit. And what I'm going to add here is I'm going to put in, let's see, let me go ahead and add content type. And the content type, what I'm doing here, by the way, is I'm asking for the information. I want the information, I'm going to use the Yang data model, but I want it in JSON. The default is actually XML. Okay, I'm going to do accept. I want the same thing here. We'll talk more about all of this later. And I want using the Yang data model. And I want it in the encoding in JSON. Okay. All right. All right. So what I'm going to do now is click send. And it sent the request. Let me scroll up here. First of all, over here, if you can see this, kind of, I know not really easy to see, but over here's the status 200 OK. So that's a typical HTTP response code, meaning that the GET request was successful. And here we can see the information that I requested using the IETF interfaces Yang model. That's giving me some information about the interfaces. So I have loopback 1. Well, here's my gigabit 1. This is actually it received its IP address via DHCP. And it's actually, this is the IP address here that I use to access it, 192.168.56.104. Matter of fact, you can see that right over here, the gigabit 1 interface. Okay, it is enabled, meaning it's up. I have some other interfaces just to show additional information. Loopback 1, there's the address, IP address, net mask. Okay, so it also, this is IPv4. Can also get IPv6 information. Here we have the loopback 2 information, loopback 3. Just to show you another example, I think I have one right here. Okay, this is an example using a Cisco data model, Yang data model. So if you can see, I'm accessing, it's still a GET. It's same IP address, RESTCONF data, but the data model I'm using is called Cisco IOS XE native. This is a data model created specifically by and for the Cisco IOS XE operating system. If we look at the authorization, it's the same. Headers. And what I did here with the headers is I did not do JSON. Okay, so the output is an XML. That's what it defaults to. This particular Yang data model is a data model for basically similar to a running config, if you're familiar with Cisco iOS. So if I scroll through here, I can see some information that might be familiar to you, like the host name. Here's the username and password. So there's my username and there's my password. Okay, that we use for authentication. Okay, some other information throughout here. If you scroll through that, you might be familiar with. There's my logging synchronous information and some other things as well. Okay. All right. So this is, let me make sure I did click. Actually, I never clicked send here. This is actually old data. Let me click send. Here we go. 200 OK. You notice over here on the right? Yeah, the router, I got a message from the router, iOS, saying that a successful RESTCONF request was made. This is actually cached data that I was showing you here. So I'm showing you the actual Word data here. How did I know it was cached? Because I actually added these loopback addresses before I did this video. So there's my loopback addresses. Okay. All right. So this is just a short example of what you can do with RESTCONF. Basically, what we are doing is we are making an API call and getting data in a structured format. The data models that we're using are Yang based. With this information, it makes it much easier for me to utilize this information in any way that I want to use it. For doing analysis, configuration, whatever the documentation, whatever the case might be. So we'll go into more detail of this, much more detail a little later on RESTCONF. So anyway, I just wanted to show you a short example of what RESTCONF actually looks like using Postman. We'll also use it using Python as well. Okay. Hope you found this video a little helpful and gave you a little taste of what RESTCONF is like. Thanks.